Chainmail. It's Chainmail Mondays. That means we are continuing our solo Wargaming guide campaign to see if the Broman Empire can retrieve the sacred artifact, the girdle of Vince McMaximus. Last week I said we were going to do the aftermath of this battle over here, the Battle of Renninger Marsh. Yeah, changed my mind. Let's take a look at this, get this centered a little bit better so we can take a look at this, the strategic map. Oddly enough, we have two battles taking place at the exact same time. It's hard to know what the results over here will be until we know what the results over here are. Because, as we look at this, the Great Latora Khan and his big army are standing right here opposite the big army of the... Actually, this is a little smaller army. The Emperor's Own is a little smaller, and they're kind of eyeballing each other, seeing what happens here to decide which way to go. But the real action takes place... Oh, there goes helicopter. Bear in mind, I live on an island where people like to pretend to be Magnum PI. So you hear those from time to time. Also, military. Pretty cool. That's the sound of freedom or entertainment. At any rate, what we're looking at here is this. There's one last army. The army of the center is untouched. They have been forcing their way through the Darkbriar Woods. This is Elvish land. And so they're racing ahead of a pursuing Elvish army. They're going to break loose tomorrow. We already know this was a... Well, we don't know what the exact aftermath of this was. On July 6th, we know the orcs won, but we don't know how badly and what the ultimate ramifications for that are. We need to see what happens over here as well, because that's going to set a whole lot of things in motion. The Great Khan is going to have to bring his horde down, either to stop these guys from grabbing the belt, or maybe they'll follow up and sweep this way because they're going to get back some of their own. Fine, take your girdle. We're going to go smash Blagton. All right? That's all for the next, well, what would you say, next week. Today, we are going to do the Battle of Second Elizabeth Farm, where we have the army of the East has smashed one orcish army, and now they have a second orcish army that is coming to drive them out. This is a bit of a distraction. But by sending this army up to the east, the Emperor has managed to distract a lot of orcs. Now, it also turns out that the orcs on either side of the river don't cooperate so good. So, you know, these guys may be glad that these guys are taking it on the chin, because that means they can come down and score some booty, which will put them in good stead with the Emperor. But, be that as it may, if we zoom in on this little area here, what we're looking at is an orcish army looking to smash their way through the defenses so they can start raiding Blagton, which will draw the Emperor's own army this way, and that will free up the Emperor to either come down and put paid to this army and the remnants of the Army of the West, or to just bypass it entirely and invade and head for Hobfort. Okay, that's kind of your strategic. Let's take a look at this battle in particular now. This is what the terrain looked like for the first Battle of Baron Elizabeth Farm. And it occurred to me after we last spoke about this region that if the Bromans are now tasked with defending the farm, this is a bit of a jumping off point, a bit of a redoubt for them. But I should point out, this is not a proper castle. It's not a keep. This is a baron's estate. And not only that, but this is the kind of baron who, if you recall our lore, if you will, it was founded by a baroness whose husband died. She could not inherit the title because the Broman Empire is a bunch of misogynists, my kind of people. So she ran off into the woods. She said, the heck with you guys, and she ran off here into this kind of borderland and built herself a fortified fortress. Now, this little fort, I should say almost a border fort, it's not designed to withstand a prolonged siege. It's designed to discourage raiding parties. There's a lot of bandits, ne'er-do-wells, undesirables from the Broman Empire who roam these woods. There are also outcasts from the orcs. How pathetic do you have to be that even the orcs don't want you around? Roaming through here looking for people to beat up, so they built some pretty steady walls. But again, it's not a proper defensive fortification. So the Bromans are going to defend it. I guess, you know, they're grateful. Hey, this was going to be one of their staging points. And what with a successful battle, they realized a second army is headed their way. So they said, all right, well, we're not going to defend this area. We're going to shift our defensive line up here, and let's take a look at what the terrain looks like up here. I generated random terrain using the same process just up north, and I kind of shifted the action over a little bit so that it looks a little something like this. Let me walk you through the new terrain. This is Baron Elizabeth Farm itself, and here's that heavy wood that's right adjacent. I generated new terrain for this area. Red card, so they're really, this is not good for the Bromans, right? Wide open spaces are not good for them because they are outnumbered. So the Bromans, as they are on defense, they had to deploy first, and I haven't set the terrain up yet, but this is how I'm going to deploy them. Light horse, hoping to sweep up this way. Medium horse, likewise. Light foot to take and secure these heavy woods. Remember, heavy woods, the only troops that can move through there are light foot. Then they put their archers. Now, this fortress can only hold 100 defenders. So I put 100 archers in there, and I left all of the archers down here. So all of the archers will be shooting. Anybody that's in the fortress will defend as, well, that's whatever the highest, do they defend as heavy horse. And their attackers, now I'm not doing the full-blown siege rules from Chainmail, but I am going to give these archers a defensive bonus. And that's going to be the goal. We'll know that the orcs have won because they have taken Baron Elizabeth Farm. Looking at the numbers, the Army of the East only has, and that's what I have up here, a little bit of a roster for you guys. Check it out. Bromans, they've only got 725. That is the anchor for their army. It's just, this isn't really medieval, man. This is, you look at these numbers, this is really more, you know, lots of heavy foot, few light horse, couple of heavy horse. Now, in the case of the orcs, we're going to be using wolves for their light horse and then chariots for their heavy horse. Mainly a foot battle, and as you see, the Nashers, the orcish army that's coming down from the north, outnumbers the Bromans by 2.5 to 1. That's pretty good. So, again, taking a look at the terrain, what you have down here is light woods. And if we look at the first Baron Elizabeth, you can actually see this in that. Where did that map go? This is quite the professional. Here we go. So this is the line right here that we're using, and this stream costs 3 inches to cross. Well, that's the southern border of our battlefield now. So the Bromans' problem is that anybody that gets chased into that stream is not gonna make it. NGMI, you gotta retreat off this way. If you are forcibly retreating into there, they're gonna count as casualties. Likewise, in addition to this ridge, you know, the orcs are going to come pouring off this ridge. They've got a deep stream here. It takes a full turn to cross. If you forcibly have to cross that stream, you're going to actually have to veer off this way before you chase off. And again, I don't think that's going to be a problem for these guys. If it is, then we'll just give you like a 45-degree turn that you can slide up this way. But remember, this hill costs 2 to 1. Can't run up it, makes you fatigued if you're running up it. So that may come into play in the post-battle sequence as well. But for their part, the orcs said, oh, okay. Looking at this deployment, they said, you know what? Fine, we'll put our heavy horse and our medium horse over here. They're going to try to sweep down and chase all these horses off the battlefield. They're going to preserve their wolves for the cleanup. Because anybody that gets off of here, these wolves are going to want to track down in the woods. One giant hammer blow. They are throwing a wild haymaker at the farm. They're going to take some arrow points. You know, maybe bring the wolves down here to cut off any retreat, because they really want to wipe out as many of these guys as they can. And then likewise, they're going to send their Lightfoot, well, they'll bring their archers up here to kind of pincushion. The orcish archers will try to pincushion the Bromans. Meanwhile, we're going to have a little bit of a Lightfoot to see who controls this heavy wood, because whoever controls this heavy wood, those Lightfoot are going to be able to run out and flank enemies and add their weight of numbers to whatever big battle is going on, and it's not going to go well for the guys lose. So essentially, we're looking at a fight for the heavy woods, some archers, you know, a little bit of a horse battle over here, and then if the orcs win, they'll bring their horses around to the back, and they'll cut off any potential retreat. So that's what we're looking at. And the other thing that I did, because this is you know, a static defense rather than two armies engaged in a meeting engagement, I said, okay, fine. These guys aren't going to move because they've got their defensive line, which means these guys will be able to deploy a lot further down. In this case, my table is the width of a standard folding table, so they actually are going to be able to deploy anywhere behind this light wood here, which brings them about 8 inches onto the table. So we should have a lot more time. You know, these guys can take their time. They can advance a little slower and steadier. They may want to bring these troops up and then wait to see what happens over here, but they're really going to dictate what happens. The one question is going to be, how, after our last battle, we said, you know what, we should really put a time limit on these. And given all of the jockeying for position, the question is going to be, how many turns are we going to play at most in this battle? And the answer is, if we assume that each turn is about an hour of game time, I'm going to roll a d6, and I'm going to add 10. So anywhere from 11 to 16 turns is all we've got. 11 turns. Okay, and the justification there is that we know that it's going to be raining tomorrow. The rains are moving in this evening, and I don't know what those rains, and it's raining over the whole region, I don't know what those rains are going to mean for the battle's aftermath. I think it means anybody that retreats is going to have a better time of it. That any pursuit will look around and go, you know what? We spent the day fighting, it's cold, it's wet, everybody's miserable. I'm going to go sit in front of a warm fire, and those poor slobs will catch them later, right? But that's kind of an important role because it puts a lot more tension on these guys. In fact, I think that is hamstringing these guys. Instead of ending the game at 11 turns, what we'll do is we'll start dicing for it. At the end of turn 11, we'll roll a d6, and on a 1, the game is over. At the end of turn 12, it'll be over on a 1 or a 2. On turn 13, it'll be 1 through 3, and so on. So that way, I think that's a much better way of doing this. We've got a minimum of 11 turns, but you don't know how many turns there are, anywhere from 11 to 16. That does put pressure on the orcs to move quick, but they may have enough time to get these guys after all. So let me go ahead and set up the train, and we'll get started. And here's what she looks like all set up. You can see this is from Irregular Miniatures, nice little 2mm manor house. Let me bring that a little closer so you can see. And this is exactly how I'm picturing Baron Elizabeth Farm. Little retaining wall, you know, a couple of outbuildings, enough to keep the local bandits, to be, hey, go find someone else to attack. And there is our archer. So these archers are going to be firing as one unit, but when you attack, they'll have to choose whether you're attacking the manor house or these guys. Bear in mind the red casualty markers that you see here reflect not casualties, but we've got a situation where each of these stands represents 100 troops. Or, in the vernacular of the rules, 4 figures at a 1 to 25 ratio. Since we only have, for example, here is our light infantry, 250 guys. That means we've got 2.5 stands worth of guys, so I just put 2 casualty markers. And then I try to put the casualty markers on the stands that are going to be the first ones taking casualties. So like over here, let's go ahead and put it on that side. So on the first casualty, we're going to take off a stand. And I always apply maximum, once we hit that 4th casualty, you got to pick off a stand. In a situation like this where you've got a big mass of troops, we're going to always take from the back rank. And now that I look at this, since these guys are arrayed 2, 4, 6, 7, and with 3 casualties, there's only one other guy here, I think maybe the smarter move for the orcs is to say, you know what, I'm going to match you and flank you around like so. Gary and Dave do have a rule for subsequent rounds of combat. If you can move around, you can flank and start sweeping. And I did a little bit of that. I don't think I mentioned it in the last video, where you have 2 big blocks of troops you can spread out. And you really have to do that. Because one of the aspects of this rule set to be aware of is that it's kind of hard to do casualties. If these guys are lined up, and they're evenly matched, right? So heavy foot versus heavy foot, they're going to be rolling 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 dice, only hitting on 6s. That's only 2.5 casualties. It's going to take 2 rounds of combat, on average, to remove a single stand of your enemy. The wider your front, the faster the game plays. So that's one thing that we really need to factor in. And yeah, it also allows you to, if you can outflank your guys, these guys should be rolling attacks against stands that cannot counterattack. Or, I guess, more to the point, because you're only getting so many attacks anyway. If you can swarm around a guy, you're going to be doing additional dice to hit. Instead of this 16, maybe you're rolling 20 dice. That's an extra casualty. Now you're removing, now you're removing 4, 5, 6 casualties. You're removing a stand and a half every turn instead of just that one stand. So that's the advantage there. Now we are on turn number 1, and I think we're going to need to include... Once again, reiterate that we forgot a fairly substantial chunk of the rules during this fight. You're not going to be able to see it because we're going triple time. We're going to condense about 45 minutes of play down into 15 minutes. If you're interested in the mechanics of Chainmail, how it works, ramifications of all the subsets, how they intersect. There's a lot of other videos on my channel. There's a guy, Purple Druid, he's doing the same thing. Go watch those videos. This one is more about the campaign and how it intersects. The one thing I'll say at this point is, my chief concern, because we're looking at this from a campaign perspective, is the balance issue. And the fact that we forgot instability due to excess casualties on both sides makes it unclear to me, without some further study and thought, what the ramifications of forgetting that important rule are. I suspect that it advantages the defender in each of these fights, which would be the Broman Empire, except that it does allow an attacking force to continue the fight long after they probably should have scampered off the field. So on the balance, I think it is balance on the whole. But if you have any thoughts, go ahead and kick them down in the comment section. I'd be glad to hear it, because I'm just all over the place and not sure. With that said, let's go ahead and kick this back to the battlefield, where we're going to start off with a turn counter. Not that it really matters. And once again, I really want to talk more about how the game operates and narrate the action that you see on the tabletop. And again, here I am pointing out the defenders, and I've decided that they do have a little bit of a rampart there in front of themselves. They did have several days in which to prepare the ground. Not enough to dig a proper ditch, throw up a proper wall, but at a minimum, what it does is it allows them, I think they had like 4 or 5 days to prepare for the coming onslaught. So essentially, the biggest change that happened there is the defenders, the foot defenders, won't have to make a morale check to see whether they withstand the charge of cavalry, whether it's heavy or medium. The other thing I want to say before we get too deep into the action here is that because of the ratios of troops that have been involved in these battles so far, they feel a lot more ancient than medieval. In each of these battles, particularly last week's battle over at Renninger Marsh, we had some massive blocks of heavy and armored foot with a little bit of light and medium cavalry out on the wings. And in this battle, it's no different. You've got the cavalry over there on the right. As we look at things from the Broman perspective, there's a bit of a cavalry duel going on the right-hand side of the battlefield. And then we do have some skirmishers in those woods that are also going to get stuck in, engaged in a little bit of a fight. And, you know, if one of those skirmishers had been able to drive the other off, then, and here we are looking at the sheet showing, hey, look, the archers are really going to be critical here. They're going to do some pretty impressive damage to the orc horde as they come rushing down. And here's where archers really factor into this game. They provide a lot more impetus for the orcs to just burn through all of their, just sprint right on through. They don't have time to take 2 moves and then stop and regain their fatigue markers. They have, once they reach that 7.5-inch range of the archers, they don't have a choice. They have to move. So they will be a little more exhausted, unlike the previous battles where we had offensive forces that could take 2 or 3 moves and then take a turn off, get a drink of water, smoke a cigarette or 2, and then complete those last 2 moves so that they've got 3 or 4 turns at full fatigue. In this case, once again, we've got a battle where the orcs really have to just rush in and get stuck in, at least as far as in the center where those archers are having a field day. As I was saying, I think I got a little bit off track there. The light, and there I'm showing you that I don't have enough figures. These armies physically are built for one flavor, and the campaign has given us a slightly different one. So I'm using archers for the orcs instead of light to represent light infantry. And oddly enough, the Bromans now take the bull by the horns, and their light infantry are interested in grabbing that center heavy wood. That is going to be critical for the outnumbered Bromans. They need to control that wood so they can bring the light infantry into these melees, ideally to the left, so the light infantry can help the outnumbered cavalry. But if not in time for that, then they can come into the center where the Broman foot are outnumbered almost 2-1. It's going to be critical, even after all these bows. So once again, we have some bow shots. And now you have our first melee is the light versus light, trying to establish dominance over those woods in the center. And as we watch this, we may be able to pick out and observe where that failure to do the instability due to excess casualties plays a role. Remember that the casualty markers that are on place, the yellow, for those of you that don't know, the yellow markers are fatigue markers. Those heavy horse, this is their last chance. They're trying to drive off or I think that's medium orcish horse, wolf riders trying to drive off the bit of medium, or I think it's heavy horse actually for the Bromans. Either way, they are now exhausted, but the Bromans failed their morale check and quit the field. That will be important for the campaign because they quit the field. They are still available for the post-battle sequence. The biggest difference, and I don't think I mentioned this in the last battle at Renninger Marsh, the biggest difference in these campaign games for the winners versus losers is when you control the battlefield at the end of the game, you control the wounded that have fallen along the way. So if you win the battle, if you are in sole possession of the battlefield, your wounded will come back into the campaign after a 2-week hiatus. If you do not control the battlefield, all of your wounded are eliminated from the campaign altogether. Now, you can chalk that up however you want. Did they die of their wounds? In this case, does the victor dispatch all of the wounded? Are they marched off to some prisoner of war camp for the duration of the conflict? Doesn't really matter. That's a little above the scale that we're representing, and it's a little bit outside the game. So now we see in our tabletop that the green tide of orcs has finally come down to the impromptu palisade around Baron Elizabeth Farm. And the archers, we're treating them as one unit, even though they've got 3 guys. But let me back up. We are rolling casualties separately. We're going to treat this all as one giant combat. However, we need to roll 2 dice against the archers that are in Baron Elizabeth Farm itself. You roll 1 die, and on a 6, they take a casualty. Then we do the archers, those last 2 stands on the opposite side, and the 4 heavy foot that are attacking there roll 4 dice, and we apply casualties to those. And then, of course, over on the Broman left, you have the same thing going on. Now, there are cavalry over there on the left-hand side, and oh, look, the Bromans have been pushed back away from the line of defense. The cavalry took last turn. Instead of flooding into the flank, the Orcish cavalry, the wolves, those are light cavalry, represented by wolves, intelligent wolves, they are now eligible to charge on this next turn. And I think this is where we should have done an instability due to excess casualties check in the woods. I think that the light infantry for the Bromans have taken a 3rd casualties, and they really should have made that first check. We'll just assume that everybody made all of their incident casualties, because coming up here in a couple of turns, the Orcish light infantry are going to suffer that 1/3 casualties. They would have to make a check too. The critical thing here is that by driving the Bromans, I worked out the morale for that entire line that you see on the Broman left. All of those guys' morale scores were added to all the morale for the Orcish defenders. The attackers for the Orcs opted to take a turn. They were exhausted. They opted to take a turn. There was a real critical decision moment here. Do they flood over the defenses, or do they and fight as light infantry, or do they take a turn to recover? They made the decision to take a turn to recover, trusting that the wolves hitting the orcs in the flank, or the Bromans in the flank, would drive them from the field. They did not do that. The Broman left wing stood. Not only that, there's a 1/3 chance on a 1 or a 2 when they're impacted that they automatically recover. They rolled a 1. They did recover, which is a pretty big deal, because it means now, on the one hand, because the wolves hit them in the flank, they don't get to attack back. So at a minimum, the worst thing that could happen to those wolves is that they do some casualties and then they withdraw. And this is a little bit of an edge case where the rules are not entirely clear to me. So what I opted to do is say, okay, they're going to make one move back, and then we'll shift over so you can see that single move, and they're not going to quit the field. They hit in the flank. They may not even needed to check morale at that point, but what I opted to do is say, look, I'm going to bring them back. They've taken an exhaustion from moving, an exhaustion for the round of combat. And, the big thing is they pinned those guys in place, did a couple of free casualties. And here we roll for, because the archers were not impacted, they have to make a check as well to see if they recover. They did recover, but I'm not sure why I can't remember off the top of my head why I took those casualties off. So I'm not going to worry about that. Again, we have the cavalry skirmish continues on the right flank, and there's not a lot of casualties being delivered, but they're getting tired. Both sides are getting tired now, and the noose is tightening around the Bromans as the orcs win a very critical initiative. By winning that initiative, the orcs are able to move up past the frail line of defenses. They overrun Baron Elizabeth Farm. There's a 4. Okay, so that die roll is also critical. The wolves hit the Bromans in the flank, and once again, their courage has failed. And the wolves are able to disorder them and rally them, and they have fallen back. The archers, however, and unfortunately for the archers, they're left kind of standing on their own as their left flank crumbles, as those guys take off. Now, the archers were not contacted by the horse, so they don't get to rally back. They're stuck. Now, the good news for them is that they fall back a little bit further on that first retreat, so they are not contacted. The charge for the orc center does not have enough oomph to reach them. So they get one more turn where they are able to kind of plink away. No, because they rallied last turn. They will be able to plink away and do a few more casualties. And looking at things from the campaign perspective, that is very helpful. Those few extra casualties will come in handy, kind of in the long run. But we still have to deal with the fact that the orcs in the woods have driven off the Broman light infantry. They are winning that fight, and but they're very tired. Rather than losing the -1 on each die, we have the cavalry battle on the right goes against the Bromans, and now we have more prisoners. Blink, there's a little tag for you showing you what's going on there. And it takes a full turn to turn around, so the light infantry are stuck for the Bromans in those woods. Even if they turn around, they're going to get impacted. They're not going to be able to save those prisoners. Those prisoners are done for. The cavalry on the orc wolf riders are able to move up. Those are heavy cavalry. They're outside of charge range. They're not. They moved up on the last turn, and on this turn, they're going to be able to impact the archers. And that may be a case where you didn't want to do that, because if the archers run away, you're not going to do any casualties. And as it is, the archers don't, so they fail, and now they are going to run away as well. Or be taken prisoner, I should say. So another big chunk of prisoners taken here, and the Bromans have their backs really against the wall here. They are almost to the edge of the battlefield, but they haven't suffered too many casualties. And that, again, is going to be critical. They are essentially withdrawing from the battlefield. They stood their ground, did some casualties to the orcs, reduced their number, but they're not. This is a delaying force. So let's go ahead and drop things back down into real time. We can talk about what the last stages of this battle are and go from there. And as I said before, we're going to have to start with a bit of an apology for dropping a fairly big chunk of rules. We'll get it right next time, guys. You know what I haven't been doing on any of this is instability due to excess casualties. Maybe that's why this has taken so long. Inst deck is really important. If you take a quarter of your casualties like these guys did, you need to roll an 8 or better to stay on the table. And with a 6, they're gone, man. Oh, that's why this has taken so long. Man, for a guy who's really good at miniature war games, I'm really bad at miniature war games. Inst deck changes. I should probably just record both of these battles again. The only thing I can say is I screwed that up on both sides. Who does that give the advantage to? The defenders. So even with the advantages, in fact, it kind of, Boy, I'd have to not do this on camera because that would take some serious thinking. We're going to call these light, it's right here too, morale, instability due to excess casualties. When those light peasants receive a quarter casualties, they need a 2d6 to stay on the board. When they receive half casualties, you just yeet them. Likewise, with the medium horse, boy, that could have been important. I don't think these guys suffered. These are heavy foot. I don't think they suffered a third casualties, though, did they? 2, 4, 6, 7. How many guys did they start the battle with? 7. They didn't suffer a whole lot of casualties at all. They basically just expended all their pointless troops. These guys, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. These guys might have needed to make an instability due to excess casualties check. And a 7 would do it for heavy foot. So we might not... Yeah, I got to remember that. You guys got to remind me in the comments section, okay? But we are done with this battle. And I think we all know what happened. 2, 4, 6... 600 of these troops have escaped. They're pursued by wolves. That's going to lead to a lot more casualties in the retreat. They're probably going to be about 300 guys running for the border. The big question is going to be exactly how many prisoners were taken, exactly how many survivors are there to head down south into the Broman Empire and start causing concern. Are they going to draw the Emperor over? That's going to be the real question. We'll deal with that in the next episode in a separate video. Thanks for following along. I appreciate it. And as always, I'm praying for you.